Welcome back to Halftime by Bob Buford. And I am still at chapter 3, A Season of Searching. There's a time for everything, a time to search and a time to give up, according to Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1 and 6. It's a cherished tenet of supply guide side economic that a rising tide lifts all the boats in the ocean. Not everyone subscribes to this theory, but my industry, the television business, was nothing short of commercial and cultural tidal wave that rolls across the United States during the 1960s and 70s. It became an entertainment and information colossus, changing the way people behaved and related to each other. My boat rose. Walter Cronkite, the now retired news anchor for CBS, emerged not only as a household name and familiar face, but Uncle Walter also ranked high on a list of the most trusted men in America. Because of television's power to confer authority and celebrity, that's the way it was, and largely still is. It was as you well might imagine, an especially fortuitous and rewarding time to be in commercial television business. Over a 3 decade period in which my family's holdings expanded from a single TV station in Tyler to an array of cable television systems in several parts of the country. Buford Television Inc. grew at a rate of 25% annually. I learned many years ago from management expert Peter Drucker that for business growth to be sustained year after year, the leaders of a company have to be either crazy, crooked, or open to change based on their company's growth and opportunity and challenges that expansion poses for them. Well, the television business gave us a wonderful ride from 1954 to 1986. Very few industries have had a period of uninterrupted growth like those of us in television management experienced during that time. But the solid, even spectacular growth of Buford Television Inc. depended in some measure on judicious change. By the mid 1980s, for example, the action was no longer in owning individual station. Most people in the United States had the option of watching 35 to 55 stations through cable link up. At BTI, we divested our television station and moved entirely in the cable business. Business like business, like life, is seasonal. Circumstances change. A company, just like a person, needs to periodically shift its focus in order to achieve healthy growth. I still recall the colorful yearly days of ABC TV's Monday night football broadcast when Dan Meredith, a former quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, would signal to the audience that the game was done, even if there were several minutes remaining to be played. Turn out the lights, he would sing in his Texas twang, "The party's over." Although I appreciate the wisdom in the old proverb that it's better to be lucky than smart, I believe that it's the best of all to be bright enough to know when the party's over and when it's time to move on to the next event. I moved into the presidency and chairman's seat in the company and became member, the oldest family member at the age of 31. When my mother died in a fire that consumed her hotel room in downtown Dallas, my mother had taught me a great deal about business and about life. She was, like most people of achievement, a person of great strength and also great weaknesses. She was she was at risk. She was a risk taker and forceful, dedicated to success in business and to raising me with the gift of self-esteem and self-assurance. When I was in high school, she introduced me wherever we went as the world's greatest left end. The truth was that I played on the second string in my junior year, becoming backing up a truly fine all-state left end. In my senior year, I started in that position but was merely adequate as a football player. Still, I loved hearing her introduce me that way. And came those words gave me both affirmation and inspiration. But my mother was also naive and often undisciplined, weaknesses that no doubt contributed greatly to the disappointments and disillusion of her later marital relationships. They were weaknesses I swore to avoid. Although I had work in the family business since leaving college, my mother's death signaled a new season in my life. New responsibilities, new choices, new dreams. It was time for the next generation, and it came during an era of enormous upheaval in society. The leading edge of the baby boomers were entering college and the workplace. The Vietnam War was dragging on. Nixon was plotting his re-election and Watergate was waiting to happen. I was not unaffected by all that social straining, but my chief focus was on growing the business and my life and myself. I was deeply attracted to self help and self improvement books, tapes at the time, tapes at the time. I read everything that Peter Drucker had written. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Drucker had written. I attended the American Management Association's president course. I went to Harvard Business School owner manager program, a 9 week hot house course that compressed major elements of their MBA curriculum. Without benefit of the mind expanding drugs that were popular at the time, I visualized my dreams, what I could conquer and believe I knew I could achieve with a concerted effort of the will. What I could conjure and believe I know I could achieve with a concerted effort of the will. That was my credo, my mantra. Tune out Woodstock and forget about the White House dirty tricks and the trustworthiness of anyone over the age of 30. I firmly I firmly believe I could shape my life by my dreams and the desires of my heart. The only piece of my personality that gave me even a moment's pause was a fleeting concern about my degree of intensity and drivenness about the business. I had a sense that this hyperfocus might cost me in other areas of my life. Through all the excitement of actually running a business and reaping the rewards of success, a question tugged at a corner of my mind. What might you lose with all this gaining? Clearly, there was more to life than business. Even so, not long after taking over the business, I hid myself away with a yellow pad and embarked on a painstaking career and personal evaluation that would allow course corrections. I asked myself the question I posed to you in chapter 1. If my life were absolutely perfect, what would it what would its element be or its elements be? I have to hydrate. If my life were absolutely perfect, what would its elements be? I was 34 years old at that time, and it was the first opportunity I had taken in my life to reflect deeply on what I most wanted to accomplish and be. The answer would provide a glimpse of how I should live. I wrote down 6 goals. 1, grow the business at least 10% a year. 2, I have a to have a vital marriage to my wife Linda and to remain married to her until death temporarily forces us apart. Number 3, to serve God by serving others, to lay up treasures in heaven by teaching or counseling in my spare time at the church we attended or anywhere else where I was allowed and encouraged to use my gifts. 4, to engender the high self esteem in my son, Ross. This, I believe, was best equipped when equipped. This would best equip him for whatever circumstances he found himself in. I rank myself as a father not so much on his grades or whether he won tennis tournaments, but rather on whether my son feels good about himself. An important part of this was instilling a grounded faith in something trustworthy beyond himself. I grow culturally Number 5, to grow culturally and intellectually in ways that had somehow evaded me during my student years. Number 6, to figure out what to do with the money I have I was making and to determine how much was enough. I determined to invest the money I didn't use or didn't need in the highest cause I could imagine. What would that be? That was number 6. These 6 goals were the way I made sense of what I was doing with my life. I focused almost exclusively on these areas and eliminated anything that didn't fit. The big chance, the big change from my prior intense focus on growing the business was I had introduced an element of balance into my life. The last 5 goals defined what was important to me. They answer the question, what will I lose with all this gaining? I wanted to be sure I didn't trade something I considered priceless. The love of my wife, the self esteem of my son, the opportunity to broaden my horizon through learning, the expression of my faith through life of service, or something I had to come to have more than enough of: money, power, and achievement. That was not neither then nor now. On an exhaustive list of life goals, but it was enough to get me into a search for the core commitment and compassions that could help me make sense of myself. I was a first half. I was a first half player who was beginning to see the second half coming. Chapter 4: Success Panic. It snuck it's it snuck in like a thief in the night, a quiet, insidious intruder, disturbing the the dark peace, and slinking about to pick at the trappings of a life overflowing with contentment, money, achievement, and energy. Success panic passed through the threshold of my door when I was 44. It hit me with a blunt object, my slavish devotion to the art of the deal and the thrill of the kill. How much was enough? By this time, the television business had grown beyond our most optimistic objectives. As a result, I had long since arrived at, and in fact surpassed, the goal I had established for accumulation of wealth. Had surpassed, oh wow, excuse me. The goal I had surpassed the goal I had established for accumulation of wealth. I had the big house, I had the Jaguar. I could and did travel to any place on earth I wished. I had even reached or was ahead of the plan on most of the rest of my goals as well. Success panic was wholly unexpected. I remember reading a Sierra Club book about the assault on the western ridge of Mount Everest. After spending millions of dollars and experiencing loss of life among their fellow climbers, 2 men finally reached the peak of Mount Everest. There at the top, they viewed the world from its highest point. They had overcome enormous impediments to reach their destination, their ultimate goal, yet the emotion they experienced was not one of unadulterated elation and joyfulness. After just a few minutes, one of them began worrying about how to get down the other side before the wind blew them off the top of the mountain. In the first half mindset, getting to the apex is far more exciting and rewarding than arriving there. Okay? When success panic struck, it brought me to a long delayed crossroads and forced me to consider a critically important set of decisions before I could take another step. Would I move the finish line forward, or so that I could keep running the race and measuring the time it took to complete each new lap? Would I give myself permission to be open to new possibilities? Could I have a constructive minefield crisis? My midlife crisis. Could I could I have a constructive midlife crisis after success? What? There were difficult questions for me to address because of my attachment to business and my awareness of the entrepreneurial and leadership qualities that I had developed through my professional career. The business arena was the venue where I proved myself, my worth, my wisdom. Each day, it was a stage on which I could demonstrate my gifts and my savvy. It was a comfortable world for me, not merely because it was familiar, but also because it was a world that expected me to be demanding and not loving. It was measurable. I was frankly frightened by the idea of turning back towards the world of the church, the work of the church, or the works of service, those long ago but not quite forgotten prompting towards ministry that had gripped me as a child. Ministry, as I always had understood it, was loving but not very demanding. The very antithesis of the real world I had populated quite cheerfully for nearly a quarter century. It seemed too squishy, too nice, too otherworldly, too difficult to measure. What's more, all my friends provided ample affirmation for me to for me to remain as CEO of a successful company. Yet, like Elijah, the still small voice, barely audible, always gently kept calling to me as I was sitting there in a cold middle-aged sweat brought on by still roaring flames of my success. Huh? Yet, like Elijah, the still small voice, barely audible, always gentle, kept calling to me, and I calling to me as I was sitting there in a cold middle-aged sweat brought on by the still roaring flames of my success. The gentle but insistent voice was asking me to consider what else, a question that I had deferred and suppressed for all of my adult life. Do you understand the difference between being called and being driven? Quite plainly, I had come to a point at which yet another fundamental decision had to be made. Like most decisions in real life, it was not a stark choice between black and white, between self-indulgence and self-denial, between leadership and fellowship. It would be found in the vast gray area between such polar extremes. Huh? It would be found in the vast gray area between such polar extremes. But facing that question only served to underscore both the price and the glory of making a commitment to put my most central beliefs and tested talent into action in my life. It was another helpful episode in my search for meaning, one that softened me up for the imminent exploration within, the probing that would finally help me unveil the source of my satisfaction and longing. For it was the question that made me wonder what I might be losing with all this gaining. My worry was that I would become addicted to success. It's a delicate and dangerous zone, the interface between success and significance. My worry was that I would become addicted to success. It's a delicate and dangerous zone, the interface between success and significance. To get as much success as you can without getting captured by it, becoming its prisoner. Keeping success the servant, not the master. It's a tension very much like scenes in Fatal Attraction, where Michael Douglas is sitting across from Glenn Close, knowing that his wife is going to be gone for the weekend and feeling crazy with desire. He is right on the border between being master of his desire and committing an act that would make him its prisoner. He chose to become a prisoner. And I knew it was time to make my own choice. And I knew it was time to make my own choice. I will stop there for today. This was very interesting to me. I don't know about you, but if you listen to this, it's very sobering. And I feel like it is opening me to see that goals can be changed or they outdo themselves, so they have to be changed. So, anyway, tell me what you think. Next time, I will try to get through 5 and 6, maybe even 7, as I improve on this journey. Thank you for joining me. And if you have any comment, please feel free to leave it. I will keep reading.